You know 'em, you see 'em everywhere this time of year, that cheerful orange face of fall, sitting right there on our front porches. But behind that familiar grin, there's this hidden world of high-stakes science, really a story of survival against all odds.
I mean, from pumpkin spice everything to pies and, of course, decorations, it's so familiar it just feels like part of the season, right? Just a simple part of fall.
But here's the secret. Getting from one tiny little seed to a giant prize-winning pumpkin is, well, it's anything but simple. It's a high-stakes game against the clock, against pests, and sometimes even against its own biology.
So let's do it. Let's break down that secret science. We're going to follow the entire life cycle, from the seed all the way to the stoop, to uncover the critical moments that make or break our Halloween hero.
Okay, so where does this all start? Well, way before a seed ever hits the dirt. It begins with the blueprint, the genetics locked inside that single seed. And believe me, the final outcome is massively influenced by this very first choice. And the genetic diversity is just staggering. You've got pumpkin cultivars that range from these tiny 1-pound decorative minis all the way to absolute behemoths bred for competition. And this isn't just about how you care for them, it's a fundamental difference written right into their DNA.
This genetic potential creates such a dramatic range. I mean, on one end, you have tiny little pumpkins that can fit right in the palm of your hand. And on the other, you have giants that can literally outweigh a person. They're in the same plant family, but their genetic code sends them down wildly different paths from the moment they sprout.
So you've picked your genetic champion. Now what? Well, now it's time to provide the fuel. A pumpkin needs the perfect diet to reach its potential. And that all starts in the soil. And pumpkins are incredibly picky eaters. The soil's pH has to be in this really narrow sweet spot between 6.0 and 6.8. Think of pH as the gatekeeper to the pantry. If it's too high or too low, all the essential nutrients stay locked away, no matter how much fertilizer you throw at it. And let me tell you, these things are hungry. Pumpkins are what we call heavy feeders, and they consume huge amounts of nitrogen for vine growth, phosphorus for all the flowers, and potassium for the fruit itself. To put that in perspective, we're talking up to 130 pounds of nitrogen per acre. That is a serious appetite. With the plant growing strong and healthy, we get to the most dramatic, most time-sensitive moment in its life, pollination. This is it. This is where a potential pumpkin is either born or lost forever. Now to get this, you gotta know the two key players. First up is the male flower. It appears first, on a long stem, and it's loaded with pollen. The female flower shows up later, and you can spot it instantly because of that tiny, embryonic pumpkin at its base. That little orb, that's the ovary, just waiting to be fertilized. But here's the catch. The flowers are only open for a few hours in the early morning. That's it. If bees don't get the job done in that tiny window, growers literally have to step in themselves. They'll use a swab to collect pollen from a male flower and gently transfer it to the stigma of a female one. It's this delicate, precise operation with everything on the line. And then you wait. The next 72 hours are absolutely everything. Did the transfer work? Was the pollen any good? The fate of that pumpkin just hangs in the balance. And you know, the verdict is usually pretty clear. On the left, you see success. That tiny pumpkin at the base of the flower starts to swell, it turns a deeper green. But on the right, failure. The unfertilized ovary just withers, turns yellow, and falls right off the vine. It's a brutal but fascinating process to watch. So, a pumpkin is born, but its journey is far, far from over. Now, it has to actually survive the pumpkin patch, which is basically a gauntlet of threats all trying to take it down. One of the main villains of this story is powdery mildew. It might look like just a harmless dusting of white spots on the leaves, but what it's really doing is covering the plant's solar panels. It blocks photosynthesis and slowly starves the pumpkin of the sugars it needs to grow. So how do growers fight back? Well, it's a three-part strategy. First, you start by choosing plant varieties that are naturally resistant. Smart. Second, you make sure there's good air circulation by spacing the plants out. And if mildew still shows up, you can use targeted sulfur-based fungicides. It's a constant battle all season long. Okay, let's fast forward. Our pumpkin made it. It survived. It's big, it's orange, and it's ready for the final phase of its journey. The science that happens after it leaves the vine. Knowing exactly when to harvest is critical, and the most reliable way to do it is this simple but super effective trick called the fingernail test. You just press your thumbnail against the rind. If it's hard enough that you can't puncture it, it's ready. A soft rind means it's not mature and it just won't last. Now, once it's harvested, the pumpkin goes through a process called curing. This sounds a little weird, but it's so important. It's exposed to high heat and humidity for about 2 weeks. This lets any nicks or cuts on the surface heal over, forming a kind of protective scab. This tough outer skin is absolutely essential for making that pumpkin last. Okay, so you've got your pumpkin home, you carved your masterpiece. How would you stop it from collapsing into a pile of mush in just a few days? Well, science gives us a clear 3-step plan. First, disinfect all the surfaces with a mild bleach solution to kill off mold and bacteria. Second, seal up all the cut edges with petroleum jelly to lock in moisture. And third, use cool LED lights for illumination.
And that last step is so crucial. This quote here from an agricultural extension highlights a major safety warning. Sealing the pumpkin with something flammable like petroleum jelly and then sticking a hot candle inside is a serious fire hazard. Seriously, always use LEDs. Which brings us all the way back to our original question. After seeing its entire journey, can we really look at a pumpkin as just a simple decoration? Or should we see it for what it truly is? A genetic marvel, a feat of chemistry, and the ultimate survivor of a season-long battle for life.